buy luxury type automobiles usually have a pretty good idea of what they expect to get for their money. They want up-to-date styling with distinctive appearance both outside and inside the car. They want better than average performance, the best riding quality and handling ease, extra roominess, luxurious convenience, and of course, the utmost in safety and dependability. But how can the fine car buyer be sure he's getting the most for his money in every one of the fine car qualities we've just mentioned? If he's been sticking with a certain make purely from habit, he'll never know for sure. If he buys a certain make just because a friend or neighbor recommended it, he could be misled, unintentionally, of course, because you see there's more than one make to choose from in the fine car field. Only by making a side-by-side comparison can the buyer who wants the finest be sure he's making the wisest choice. So let's make a side-by-side comparison of two cars that are priced within a few dollars of each other, Imperial and Cadillac. Let's take a look through the eyes of an independent automotive organization whose business it is to find out whether cars are any different. Take appearance, for example. Tastes are different with different people, and styling, after all, is really a matter of personal opinion. So let's take a walk around Imperial and Cadillac, beginning with a look at the front of both cars. Lowness is one thing that's news for 1957, and notice that Imperial is 2.5 inches lower. Which do you think is better looking? And here's a side view. The Imperial is 8 inches longer. Which car do you think is newer looking? Which do you think is better looking? Now compare the going away look of these cars. Which is newer looking? Which do you like the better? Here are just a few of Imperial's styling highlights that are news. Here's a compound windshield that wraps around at the top as well as the sides. Here's the exclusive and distinctive Lando type roof treatment. Here are new dual headlights, available as optional equipment, but not available on Cadillac at all. And here's curved side window glass, an industry-wide first for Imperial. Cadillac has nothing to match these. From the inside, both cars appear tastefully trimmed in keeping with fine car quality. Although here, too, we find styling news by Imperial in details like those airplane-type door handles. Now, let's go out to the Chrysler Engineering Proving Grounds about 75 miles outside Detroit, where automotive experts have recently conducted intensive road tests of Imperial and Cadillac. The New Yorker was included in many of these tests for information on how it compared. The test crew discovered a lot of very interesting facts that prove there are differences in these cars when you take them out on the road. Before any road tests were made, all cars were carefully tuned to factory specifications by expert mechanics. Professional test drivers were used, and all tests were supervised by independent automotive engineers. These men leaned over backward to assure absolute fairness and accuracy. Now, if there's one thing luxury car buyers expect, it's an outstanding ride, not only on the boulevard, but also when the going gets a bit rough. I don't think anyone here would say that Cadillac is a bad riding car, but there are differences when you compare it with Imperial. Here's what you might call a typical country railroad crossing. Doesn't look very tough, does it? Wouldn't you say a car ought to be able to go over this crossing at about 30 miles an hour without too much trouble? Let's see how Imperial and Cadillac behaved. Here, Imperial and Cadillac crossed the tracks at 30 miles an hour. These pictures were taken by a special rapid sequence camera that can take up to 20 exposures per second. Not much happening here, is there? Now look. The road makes the front ends want to dive and the rear ends want to jump. But where Imperial's torsionaire suspension keeps full control of the action, the Cadillac suspension lets the rear wheels leave the ground. Now Cadillac's rear end has to go down as springs flex in the other direction. Shock absorbers are powerless to stop this reaction, and so it bottoms with a thump. But since Imperial didn't go up in the first place, it stays almost perfectly level. Can you imagine how passengers would feel in the Cadillac? Another car length, and Cadillac still can't control body pitching. This second reaction is almost as severe as the first one. Rear wheels again are off the ground, front end nose diving. Compare this with Imperial's position at the same point in the road. Almost unbelievable, isn't it? When you think that these cars are traveling at the same speed. As the cars go almost out of camera range, you can see Cadillac still seesawing, with the rear end down again. It took another 50 feet of travel before Cadillac leveled out completely. Imperial had no trouble at any time in maintaining complete control of body movement. Don't you agree that this test shows a difference in ride? In case you're wondering how the New Yorker rides, here are the same views of its crossing on the tracks. Just over the tracks where the road dips downward, maintaining perfect control, and traveling at the same speed, 30 miles per hour, all the way out of the picture, and still as level as you'd want it to be. Wouldn't you say that Torsionaire Ride does a pretty good job of meeting luxury car standards of ride control? But this is only part of the story of what Torsionaire does. Let's look at some tests for lean on curbs. This view shows the flat paved surface where a circle, 180 feet in diameter, was laid out. On the hood of each car, a white bar was mounted vertically and checked with a carpenter's level. Then the cars were driven around the circular course at 20 miles an hour. All were photographed as they approached the camera crew. Here is the comparison, with the white bar on each hood showing the amount of lean. There is a difference, isn't there? True, it's only a few degrees. The Imperial leans 2 degrees, the Cadillac 4 degrees. That's a difference of 100%. Certainly enough to be noticed inside the cars. Incidentally, this turning radius of 90 feet is about equal to what you'd have when you turn into a wide street. Now, let's move along to another test of riding comfort. Here, engineers are getting ready to measure the amount of rear-end squat that takes place with a quick start. The cars are being fitted with white bars fastened parallel with rear bumpers. The bar on each bumper is exactly the same height above the road surface. At the top, Imperial and Cadillac are ready for the go signal. At the bottom, drivers floorboard accelerator pedals in a fast start. Wouldn't you say there was a difference in squat? Now let's see how New Yorker and Cadillac compare. Here they are, in the same kind of test setup you just saw. And New Yorker has just about the same advantage the Imperial had over Cadillac in the amount of rear-end squat. Here's something that, up to this year, nobody's done much about. It's the annoying nose dive that throws you forward as you make a quick stop. Besides being uncomfortable, the nose dive is the reason why a lot of cars lock bumpers when the car in front stops suddenly. When the front end dives, the front bumper of the car can slip under the rear bumper of the car ahead. For 1957, something has been done about brake dive. Torsionaire Ride in Imperial and New Yorker takes out 85% of it. Cadillac claims it has no front-end dive, even in emergency stops. So let's test to see if there is a difference. At the top, Imperial and Cadillac are traveling at 50 miles an hour when they get the flagman signal to hit the brakes hard. At the bottom, you see the reaction as brakes take hold. Can you see any difference in brake dive? Who has eliminated more of it? This test was run several times, and each time the result was the same. Now, if the operator will turn the record, we'll see some more test results. Before we leave the subject of ride, there's one more thing that should be mentioned, and that is tires, because tires have a lot to do with ride. For 1957, Imperial and New Yorker have new 14-inch super soft cushion tires. Cadillac uses the same 15-inch tire it had last year. Matter of fact, the Imperial tire is 950 by 14. The New Yorker tire is 900 by 14, and the Cadillac only 820 by 15. The pictures show the difference. The Imperial tire soaks up bumps better because it has a larger cross-section, which provides a larger volume of air, and it's a quieter tire, too. Notice the difference when the Chrysler and Cadillac tires are driven over an obstruction. You can see how the Chrysler tire absorbs the shock. Tire tread stays in contact with the road. So much for ride. Now let's look at performance. This is the start of a 0 to 60 mile an hour acceleration test. The Imperial, New Yorker, and Cadillac are lined up ready for the go signal. Engines are idling, transmissions in drive range, and drivers are holding brake pedals. When the flag drops, the drivers release the brakes and floorboard the accelerators. There they go, with the New Yorker jumping into a lead, followed by Imperial, with Cadillac last. Here's how they looked at 30 miles an hour. The New Yorker is pulling away and opening up quite a lead on the other cars. Just for the record, the New Yorker, which is the fastest stock car built in volume today, was doing 60 at this point and still going away. Imperial has a good two-car length lead over Cadillac. This shows a difference in getaway acceleration, doesn't it? Next was a test to compare safe passing ability on the highway. Here you see New Yorker, Imperial, and Cadillac approaching the flagman on even terms at 30 miles an hour. When the flag drops, all drivers downshift and hold accelerator pedals to the floor to simulate passing acceleration. New Yorker and Imperial both jump ahead of Cadillac. Here you can see that both the New Yorker and Imperial could have safely passed Cadillac and pulled back in line, even though all cars started on even terms. In this picture, New Yorker is traveling about 70. Wouldn't you say that there was quite a difference in safe highway passing ability between Cadillac and the other two cars? Imperial and New Yorker have a bigger engine than Cadillac, with 25 more horsepower and 30 pound-feet more torque. That's one reason for the difference in performance. And Chrysler Torque Flight has a maximum breakaway ratio of 5.63, which gives it a healthy advantage over the Cadillac hydromatic breakaway ratio of 3.97. That's another reason for the difference in performance. Of course, Imperial also offers the convenience of push-button range selection. Cadillac has the usual selector lever. With all this information on performance, you're probably wondering about fuel economy. This was checked by a fuel consumption gauge along with a fifth wheel and electronic speedometer. The engines of all three cars were tuned, of course. Now, fuel economy depends on driving habits. If you like fast starts, naturally you burn more fuel. Take it easy, and you use less. So the only accurate way to compare fuel economy is to drive at a steady speed and eliminate stop-and-go driving. That's the way this test was run. Each car was driven at steady speeds from 20 to 70, and fuel consumption checked for each speed. Here's the way it came out with a 500-pound load added to each car. The New Yorker averaged best, with 17 and 8/10 miles per gallon. Imperial and Cadillac averaged almost the same, with Imperial better at 50 to 60 cruising speeds. Cadillac had the edge at lower speeds. Engineers say that the steady 70-mile-an-hour fuel consumption figure is about what the cars would get in city traffic driving. What goes must stop. So let's take a look at stopping power. Are there any differences here? For this comparison, only Imperial and Cadillac were used since they weigh nearly the same. To check stopping ability under the worst conditions, a test was made on wet pavement using an airport runway as the straightaway. Here you see Imperial and Cadillac traveling at 40 miles an hour, side by side, toward the flagman who will signal for a quick stop. The flag goes down, and so do brake pedals, hard, as drivers try to stop in the shortest possible distance. The cars have almost stopped, and Imperial, with its total contact brakes and its extra-wide tread, is doing it sooner. Notice the brake dive on the Cadillac. Here they are at a dead stop, with Imperial about 1.5 car lengths better than Cadillac. After 4 tests like this, the results were still the same. Wouldn't you feel safer in an Imperial with this extra safe stopping distance? Now, the test cars had power steering as standard equipment, so we tested to see if there is a difference in the amount of steering help they provide. To find out, the Imperial and Cadillac were compared. since they were closest in road weight. Here is a steering effort wheel fastened to the Cadillac steering wheel. It measures the pounds of effort used by the driver in steering the car through a turn. The cars traveled at a constant 40 miles an hour. The 4-mile course is built like a typical secondary road. It includes 11 different turns. The amount of work needed to turn the car through each turn was logged by an assistant seated beside the driver. Then the Imperial and New Yorker were given the same test at the same 40-mile speed using the steering effort wheel to make every turn. Here are the results. For the 11 turns, New Yorker required 37 1/10 pounds of steering effort, and Imperial required 40 1/2 pounds. Cadillac required a total steering effort of 70 1/2 pounds. Think how much difference this would mean on an all-day drive. Wouldn't you say the difference is worth knowing about? What's more, with Chrysler full-time power steering, you have a consistent feel of the road because the power steering unit is working full-time. With Cadillac, power steering cuts on and off, so feel of the road changes as the amount of steering wheel pull changes. Test drivers remarked about the difference in visibility through the Imperial and Cadillac windshields. These pictures were taken from the driver's eye level with a special wide-angle camera. The dotted line on the Imperial windshield shows the outline of the Cadillac windshield. Imperial's double wraparound windshield and swept-back corner posts do make a difference, don't they? Defrosters have a lot to do with good visibility in bad weather. Imperial's adjustable defroster jets defrost first where you need it most. Cadillac's fixed defroster slots work from the bottom up. They take longer to clear the important eye-level area. And Imperial's windshield wiper blade is 16 inches long. Cadillac's is 13 inches. This does make a difference in bad weather visibility. Notice the difference in usable trunk space. Imperial is 32 inches deeper and 20 inches wider. This is something the luxury-type car owner appreciates. A really spacious, convenient-to-use luggage compartment. Compare the flat space you can use. Notice how cut up Cadillac's is? And here's something else the luxury car buyer might want to know. Imperial has its own exclusive body, shared with no other make. Cadillac's body shell is shared by 2 Buick models, the Super and Roadmaster. So Imperial is certainly the more individual and distinctive when compared with Cadillac. And here's another point that's important to a luxury car buyer. Every Imperial is road tested at the factory. Only a certain percentage of Cadillacs are checked this way. So there you have it. Cadillac isn't a bad car, but there are differences that should be important to buyers who want the best. And while you may not want to duplicate the road test shown in this film, a demonstration will indicate the important advantages Chrysler and Imperial have over other cars.
Hi there. I'm Bud Ames, an Imperial salesman like yourself. I've been doing pretty well, too, but a few days ago, I lost a sale to a Lincoln salesman. Now, this bothered me plenty because I thought the deal was all set. But I see now where I lost out. I just didn't get across all the advantages the prospect would get with an Imperial that he wouldn't get with a Lincoln. I decided not to get trapped like that again. So I did a little investigating on my own. And I found out plenty to tell the next Lincoln-minded prospect I meet. To begin with, Lincoln's 3 series are the Lincoln, Lincoln Premier, and Continental. They're pretty similar to one another, So I checked their middle-of-the-line four-door hardtop with ours, the Imperial Crown Southampton with the Lincoln Premier Landau. Now, Lincoln has a lot of appeal for buyers in the luxury class. I found that out the hard way. But I also found that Imperial has more of the qualities luxury buyers definitely want, but can't get in any Lincoln. Now, these qualities are fairly easy to point out, too. So, what do you say we take a walk around the Imperial, just as you and I do in a quick showroom presentation, and compare it with Lincoln? First, let's look for the differences that a prospect can see at first glance. Then we'll talk about differences a prospect will know about only if we call attention to them. Okay? Well, to start with, notice the smooth, clean lines of Imperial, compared with Lincoln's square look. There's no doubt as to which is more streamlined and therefore more modern to my way of thinking. And then at the front, the Imperial grille is big and bold and massive, with curves that blend in with the rest of the body. But what do you find in Lincoln? Headlights on a slant. You know, a lot of people, if you ask them, feel that this clashes with the design of the rest of the car. And what's more, the parking lights are located where they can be easily damaged. And when you look at the two grills up close, you can see that the Imperial bumper curves all the way back for added front-end protection. The Lincoln bumper bar just curves under partway. Now, this is just a small detail, but pointing it out to my Lincoln-minded prospects can help them see and feel the extra quality built into Imperial. Speaking of curves, here's a typical Imperial exclusive that all our prospects should know about. Curved side windows that repeat the curved body contours and flow naturally into the roof. This gives a smoother, more finished overall appearance that's important to the man who wants the best. And I also found out that the tempered glass in these windows is about 12 times stronger than the laminated type of glass used in Lincoln. Now, as you can see in your data book, tempered safety glass can take about 1,200 pounds pressure. Laminated glass can take only 100 pounds, and when it does break, it splinters. Now, besides making this safety point with my Lincoln-influenced prospects, I'd contrast the stylishness of the Silvercrest Landau roof, available on our Southamptons, with the flat, ordinary-looking roof of the Lincoln. True, Continental does offer a retractable rear window, and this has some good points. But doesn't it give a sawed-off look to the back of the roof? And that from the driver's seat, Imperial's rear vision is wide and clear, while Continental's is obstructed by the channels for the retractable rear window. Moving around to the rear of the car, Imperial looks like the thoroughbred it is, with that graceful flight sweep rear deck option, the gun sight taillights, the new rear bumper. Now, these and other details show the lively good taste a man looks for in a fine car. In contrast, Lincoln looks bulky and impractical. Its trunk lid forms part of the rear bumper and actually gets no protection at all from rear-end contacts. As for the inside of the trunk, I found that Imperial has more opening height plus more usable width and floor depth. The spare tire is placed conveniently to one side with the tire jack stored underneath and out of the way. The Lincoln trunk does have a wider opening, but look where the spare tire is. It's hard to get out, and it splits the cargo area in half. The jack is stored right where it can scratch any luggage placed on that side of the trunk. Well, a quick walk around like this naturally sparks a buyer's interest in body features that give him the protection, the comfort, and the style he expects in a fine car. Here again, there's lots to talk about when you're selling against Lincoln. In the matter of protection, we all know that the Imperial body is solidly anchored to a rugged box girder frame. This shields driver and passengers from side impact. But Lincoln has no frame. Its body is suspended directly on the driveline components. Trade reports say that Lincoln is working on problems with torsional bending and body drum with their design, a worry that Imperial owners don't have. In details of body construction, here's a typical difference. Imperial door latches with two heavy pieces of steel form a secure hook and eye interlock that's much stronger and more dependable than Lincoln's plate and gear latch. Safety studies stress the importance of secure door latches, so this small part of the car can be a big selling point with some prospects. Another place where Imperial shows up Lincoln is in the driver's compartment. Imperial has higher and wider front door entrances than Lincoln, making entry and exit much easier. And here is where Imperial can treat the driver to the last word in luxury. Swivel seats that make getting in and out a natural, pleasant movement instead of the knee-knocking workout it is with Lincoln. There's more roominess on the inside of the Imperial, too, with over an inch more space between steering wheel and the seat cushion and back. And there's more headroom, leg room, and shoulder room. This gives the feeling of spaciousness in the front compartment that a fine car buyer expects and has a right to expect. What's more, Imperial adds other luxury touches to the front seat, like this center armrest that Lincoln just doesn't have. While driving, the owner of an Imperial has better visibility at eye level where it counts because of more glass area all around. When the weather gets bad, he has electric windshield wipers that are steady and strong, instead of Lincoln's outdated vacuum wipers that tend to slow down when they're needed most, such as in passing and hill climbing. Another reason why driving an Imperial is so much more pleasurable is the beautiful simplicity of everything the driver sees or touches. Like the steering wheel, for instance. A single sturdy crossbar gives a full opening above for reading the instruments at a glance. Practical modern design like this, coupled with such niceties as soft padding of the crossbar and thumb indentations on the rim, these appeal to the sophisticated tastes of fine car buyers. And the contrast is obvious. Lincoln has a complex steering wheel that interferes with instrument readability and has no padding. On the left, it has the ordinary type of turn signal lever, and it uses the outmoded hand lever and quadrant type of transmission control. Compare this with Imperial's modern controls, push-button torque flight, and upright turn signal lever on one side of the wheel, and push-button controls for heater, defroster, air conditioner, and radio on the other side. This arrangement makes driving easier and safer by letting the driver give more of his attention to the road. The Imperial instrument cluster is graceful and well-balanced. It gives the driver a feeling of quality and style. And it simplifies driving by organizing all the controls so they're easy to reach and easy to use. Lincoln's cluster is functional. You can read the dials. But there's been no attempt to make it beautiful or even easy to use. The light switch, for instance, is under the steering wheel, way over next to the steering column, a frequently used control hard to get at. And there are other differences in the driver's compartment, too, small in themselves, but adding up to quite a bit. For example, Imperial has foam rubber padding at top and bottom of the instrument panel for greater luxury and safety. Lincoln pads only the top. In the rear compartment, again we offer more comfort, with door openings that are considerably higher and interiors that have more headroom. So, just because Lincoln is a little longer on the outside doesn't mean that it's more comfortable on the inside. The facts say otherwise. Imperial styling is another inside advantage we have to sell over Lincoln. Look at the sculptured design of each individual seat, for example. Lincoln's interior styling is just like the rest of the car, in my opinion, square and unimaginative. Of course, Lincoln is not unimaginative in its claims. Here are some samples. The suspension system, key to the smoothest ride on the road. Superb road car. Most powerful braking system. Performance that's first in the fine car field. A miracle in motion. Well, that's what Lincoln tells its salesmen and its prospects. But let's look at the facts, one at a time, in just a moment. Lincoln certainly is longer and heavier than other cars, and some people think this automatically means a better ride. Well, as a matter of fact, it did. Back in the 1920s and 30s, when wheelbase and weight were practically the only way to get a reasonably bearable ride. But today, it's advanced engineering practically applied to a car's suspension system that provides the smooth yet controllable ride that discriminating people demand. And by far the finest suspension system today is the Imperial Torsionaire Ride for 59, with modern torsion springs in front and leaf springs in the rear, outboard mounted, with the rear axle forward of the spring center and Oriflow shock absorbers. The result? Well, let's get an objective opinion from a recognized automobile authority. The 59 Imperial is the finest engineered car in the world today. It has the best ride, the best suspension, the best of everything from an engineering standpoint, according to Tom McCahill, the country's leading independent automotive expert. And what does Lincoln have? Ordinary coil springs front and rear with conventional shock absorbers. For straight boulevard driving, these give a smooth ride. But as for roadability, well, I'm going to show my next Lincoln-minded prospects the action shots in our bulletin. Then they can see for themselves how Lincoln lives up to its claim of being a miracle in motion. Here's Lincoln crossing an intersection hump at 25 miles an hour. Look at how the front end bottoms, then bounces up with the front wheels off the ground. Not much control there. And Lincoln continues to pitch for several cycles afterwards. Going into a turn at 25 miles an hour, Lincoln starts to lean. This tends to throw the passengers sideways, and in the middle of the turn, Lincoln leans sharply. Coil springs and ordinary shock absorbers just don't have the stability of torsionaire suspension. Now, I don't have to make like a test driver to prove Imperial's better ride either, especially to a prospect who has driven a 59 Lincoln. A reasonably good demonstration will do if it includes a few moderate humps and turns taken at moderate speed. As you know, Imperial takes a hump beautifully, with no pitching and bouncing like you get with ordinary suspension. She levels out quickly with all wheels staying on the road for full control. On turns, Imperial shows little tendency to lean and treats passengers gently, the way the owner of a prestige car expects them to be treated. Well, so much for roadability and riding qualities. Now, how about brakes? Lincoln has about 4% more brake lining area, about 11 square inches to be exact. But it needs more because it's a heavier car. And there's a lot more to brakes than just the amount of lining. Here's what I mean. Imperial total contact brakes bring the entire brake lining into contact with the brake drum under even pressure. This gives total contact for safe, sure stopping and longer brake life. Lincoln brakes provide only partial contact with slower, unpredictable stops and uneven lining wear. On front brakes, Imperial has 2 cylinders which divide the work evenly between the 2 shoes so that each does 50%. The result? More even braking effort and more even lining wear. Lincoln has only 1 cylinder. Stopping effort is divided unevenly between the shoes, 80 and 20%. This is less efficient and dependable and causes uneven lining wear. And what's more, Imperial has bonded brake linings while Lincoln's are riveted. Since bonded linings last longer, they require less frequent replacement. And here's another plus that I can talk about from the data book. Imperial's parking brake is the most powerful in the industry. It's a separate braking system and is not connected to the regular brakes like Lincoln's. Because it is so powerful, the brake needs no help from a park position in the transmission as Lincoln does. And of course, we all know the advantages of safety rim wheels, another Imperial advantage that you just can't get on Lincoln or Continental. When you boil it all down, fellas, Imperial is a much safer car than Lincoln because it's got more stopping power and better control of that power. And as for go power, the all-new Imperial engine produces the same horsepower as Lincoln's, but with less size and weight. In other words, it's more efficient, better engineered. Its power is put to better use, too, thanks to our torque-flight transmission. Imperial's breakaway ratio, that is, power multiplication at a standing start, is always 5.39 to 1. Lincoln's best ratio is 4.97. And in the ordinary driving range, number 2 on the Lincoln quadrant, the breakaway ratio is an even lower 3.10. Another reason why Imperial consistently outperforms Lincoln. An additional source of pride to the owner of a luxury car is the optional equipment that tends to customize his car and set it apart from all others on the road. And what do we find? A whole group of options that are not available on Lincoln at any cost. In addition to swivel seats and silver crest Landau roof, Imperial offers the Flight Sweep rear deck with its sports car flavor, the Mirror-matic rear-view mirror with its photoelectric cell that automatically dims the reflection of bright headlights from the rear, the autopilot that acts as a speed warning device or takes over speed control on long stretches of open highway, allowing the driver to relax more. And there's the rear window defogger that gives safe visibility to the rear in bad weather, and the instant heater that gives outlet temperatures up to 100 degrees about 30 seconds after you push the button. So you see, fellas, we have a whale of a story against Lincoln and Continental this year. And if we tell this story to our Lincoln-minded prospects, if we let them know where and why Imperial offers them so much more than Lincoln or any other car, then we'll put more of them where they belong, behind the wheel of Imperial 459.